much for joining us tonight. We hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Have a good night.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's a white people thing.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You alright?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
We would never hit 12 drunk. Never send it drunk. Do a stoppie drunk. We would never drift drunk. So you should never drive drunk. Drive sober or get pulled over.
Today I'm going to talk to you about physics. Come on in, girls. Let's go. This is the first rocket to get humans to Mars.
Really tall.
I'm a rocket structural engineer, designing and building parts of the rocket. You are the generation that will be stepping foot on Mars. Do I have a group of astronauts on my hands?
Yes.
You can become a rocket scientist or what?
Okay, all right, we're going to start it right on time at 5:30. Hello, welcome everyone. Good evening. Glad to see you're here. It's Brain Awareness Week, and I have to do the Phil Donahue microphone thing for the recording of this. I promise not to make any statements and then point at you, Phil Donahue style. I promise not to do that. So let's talk about teen brains, their health, their development, and their vulnerability. And I did make a mistake right off the bat. There are two sponsors of this, not just the Oregon Cares Coalition, but Community Education and Recreation. Yay! Okay, that is a sponsor that should have been here as well. I do want to be sure to say that this topic falls within the very important and very heavy lifting that this coalition engages with every day. And I think it's really important that we all acknowledge the incredible, inspired, tireless leadership that we have from Cynthia DiCamilli and Amy Miller. I think these two people need to be recognized for everything they do, which is a lot. I'll hold the microphone out. So I thought that was worthy. All right, so we know we have some time constraints, but there's some important things. So 4 relevant statements to begin. Number 1, over 20 million Americans suffer from substance use disorders, what was originally we used to refer to as addiction, substance use disorders. 90% of Americans with the substance abuse began using these substances before the age of 18. Addiction is a disease for the vast majority of patients that begins in adolescence. Third statement, during the ages of 10 to 19, the brain is rapidly changing. And the last statement, adults play a critical role in the adolescent's decisions about substance use. So I think those 4 statements really help frame all of the information that we've been trying to gather and convey to the community. I'm left wondering, how do we understand and explain these statements, particularly to people who genuinely want to know and have conversations, whether they be the teens or the parents? How do we do that? Why should the teens listen and believe us? We have an interesting effect going there. I'm not sure what that means. No? Computer's awake? There you go. Okay. Hopefully not under the influence of substances. Why should parents and guardians in our community listen and believe us when we say these things? The teens, they're looking at the adults in their lives, and the adults could be consuming addictive substances. Particularly, think about the teens that are being blitzed by clever marketing. When I show this picture to high school students here in Oregon, in Stoughton, in Lodi, in Richland Center, it is really interesting to me the comments that we get from those sophomores, for instance, about this marketing and what the messages they are picking up from this clever advertising. Oftentimes, there is this notion that the teens are giving us that, you know, this marketing would suggest that the consumption of Bud Light leads to a good time, and it's a part of what people do when they get together to have fun. So why is it okay for the adults to do that, but not the teen? When the teen asks you, and they do this a lot, did you, parent or guardian, did you consume an addictive substance as a teen? Oftentimes, the parent or the guardian is a bit flummoxed about how to handle that. What about the doubts in the mind of that parent or guardian when they authentically consider this challenge? Why should those parents, those guardians ever want to change the Wisconsin culture? Is it possible to reconcile these questions and viewpoints with an understanding of the current neuroscience? It is not my goal in the next 30 minutes to make you neuroscientists, but let's have some reasonable information about these good questions. Come on, there we go. Let's add the basic problem of time. Parents, guardians, teams, they do not have the time nor the desire to read the complete scholarly research reports that present the information. Everyone on their phones, they want these pithy, concise, applicable descriptions with understanding that comes with just a few lines of text. That's really hard to do. So, can we talk about brain development in a way that everyone can grasp the importance of delaying consumption of alcohol and other addictive substances? Why does the consumption of alcohol and other addictive substances, why is that less problematic to the brain past 21 to 25 years old? How do we talk with the teens about this? Why do we talk about with the teens? What do we need to know? What do they need to know? And how do we address that most common problem of a blank screen? I honestly don't know why it's doing that. It's some kind of weird connection. Anyway, so brief introduction, some factual information up front. We think about the brain as it's developing, particularly in the teens. We are preparing the foundation for mental, physical, and social health for the rest of their adult lives. This period of transition from 10 to 20 years old, this is periods of vulnerability, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that vulnerability now. More damage is done during this period of vulnerability by alcohol and other drugs of addiction to the developing brains, more so than what happens to adult brains, and adult brains will define by anywhere as 25 onward. So adolescence, this represents a time of major plasticity of those brain systems that regulate motivated behavior and cognition. It is important that we look at some neurophysiology to understand why it is that developing brain is more sensitive to these substances. The big question, why is it measurable by repeated people? Many different ways it's been done. If you increase the consumption, the abuse of alcohol and other drugs of addiction, If you increase that or you start that sooner in the teenage years, you greatly increase the likelihood that that person will become an addicted person later in life to one of the substances. Why does that happen? That's the biggest question of all. And we're having a lot of fun here. Our ambitious goals continue to be: make the science accessible and relatable to the parent or guardian in Oregon. Major goal of the coalition work. Make the science accessible and relatable to the typical preteen or teen in Oregon. Major goal of the coalition work. And in particular, I'm very taken with this cartoon. So very often, what people prefer are the simple answers that are wrong. And if you take the time to figure out the complex answers, it is more work, it is more effort, but it is far better, far more long-lasting and beneficial. So let's make it clear what is known about brain development and what happens when alcohol and other drugs of addiction are placed onto those developing teen brains. Let's make it clear how the information applies to the real world, real-time lives in Oregon for both the teens and the parent guardians. And let's try to provide some answers to the most often asked questions. And these are often the ones that are most difficult to answer. So first bit of neuroscience that we have to touch on. Let's say that this is a typical adult brain. So this will be after that 21 to 25 year period of time. Globally, when you look at it, you can think of these models, which many schools and programs have. They allow you to take them apart. The thing is, it's very useful for gross anatomy, heavy emphasis on gross, and you can identify major structures. The problem that you get into is what's happening on the inside. And so real quick, just looking at this brain, that outer layer called the cerebral cortex, that's what we identify as the humanity part of this structure. It's the gray matter. It's where the cell bodies are. This is where so much of our human species, our human characteristics reside. There's multiple lobes to the cerebral cortex. The frontal lobe is this part up here, right under this hard skull. It's okay, I played soccer. That's where we have executive decisions, where we have the perceptions, when sensation becomes perception, if you will. That's all in that frontal lobe. And you'll see in a moment that's critical to making mature, adult, logical decisions. There's a parietal lobe. This is on the sides of your head. This is very important for reception of information on and about your body. Temperature, pain, proprioception. You're all sitting in a chair. You're all aware of that because all that information is sent to the parietal lobe. The occipital lobe is all the way in the back. That receives the information from your eyes. So we associate this back part with vision. On the lower side is the temporal lobe. That's right behind your ear. That's where all the auditory information arrives. And I have two more parts I want to highlight. The cerebellum. This is at the lowest part back here. Very important for motor control. As I choose to move around and you choose to sit and maybe change position as well, you make use of your cerebellum. And finally, the medulla, which is the brainstem. Think automatic life control. All of your base cardiovascular and respiratory control centers are within that brainstem. That's the picture of the adult brain. It's formed, it's connected, it's working. And what I need to say is that it's not like these lobes operate in isolation of each other, but rather they are connected. And I'm going to show you the connections in a moment. The connections are what allow us to process information and make decisions. So, an example of that. All of you, there's actually a fair number of people here. So as one, if I say to you 2 + 2 =, you all say loudly. 4. Thank you. I would like you to pause for a moment and understand what just happened. I created sound waves, air pressure waves, that traveled through this room. They came to your ear. Tiny bones in your ear vibrated. Those tiny bones generated signals that then traveled to the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe received that information, that sensation, and then sent a signal via connections to your frontal cortex and told the frontal cortex there were some vibrations. And this is what that signal was. And the frontal cortex recognizes there's going to be a need for a memory. The frontal cortex then sent a signal to the hypothalamus, where you have memory, and informed the hypothalamus that we need some information. Some sound waves have arrived. We think that there is this quantity of 2 plus a quantity of 2. What do you have in the data files for that? Hypothalamus realizes, not hypothalamus, hippocampus, my apologies. The hippocampus realizes, oh, that's a new mathematical construct, 4. So that signal is sent back to the frontal cortex. The frontal cortex decides, you know, I'm motivated, I'm engaged. Yes, I'm going to answer this question, and I'm going to say 4. So you all took a breath in, and you passed that air over your larynx. Your larynx cords vibrated, and you said 4. Folks, that's not even half of the physiology that just happened. That's amazing, is it not? And that's all because of the connections that exist. And what I want to highlight for you, just in general, you have what's called the limbic system, which is multiple parts of your lower brain. That's where the hippocampus is with the memories. Here is the frontal cortex in the front part, and it's all about the connections between these brain parts that allowed you to listen, to process, decide, and respond. That's amazing. That's because of connections. These connections are between neurons, cells, and in this artistic rendering, one neuron in your brain, one neuron, the frontal cortex, for example, one neuron. In this artistic rendering, it has connections to 4 other neurons. In reality, it probably, if we looked at an actual neuron, it might have thousands of connections, but that gets to be too messy to draw. 4 is better. What's really, really important we recognize is that these neurons are not physically coupled. It is an absolutely arresting, astounding fact. The neurons in your brain that are communicating with each other are not touching each other. They are separated by a gap, and that gap is called a synapse. And what happens is chemicals, neurotransmitters, you have heard of these in advertisements. How many of you heard of serotonin reuptake inhibitors? Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It goes between the cells. It passes between neurons. It's a connector. It's the chemical that's the connector. So, how it really looks is this. I'm very excited to have access to this picture. This is how it really looks up in your brain. Yeah, come on. There we are. Look at this. It is absolutely astounding, the science and what they can do in the lab and what they can image. Folks, what you're looking at, this is one neuron in purple. This is one neuron in the frontal cortex. Have a look at this thing. It is embedded with thousands and thousands of other cells. And I put a yellow box up here. At the top, take a look. If you could count how many synapses in that box between the purple neuron, one neuron, and all the other neurons downstream, it's going to take you some time. You're going to have to count, and it's a lot. It's more than 10. That's amazing, not only that it exists, but we can see it. Furthermore, not appreciated because of the way this was prepared, this neuron right here is receiving of its own thousands of inputs, thousands of connections. And let me just jump ahead to save time. When these connections are being formed, when all of these purple endings are making a synapse with the remaining other neurons, or down here, these neurons are making synapse on this neuron, that is an incredibly important process. And if alcohol and other drugs of addiction are in that synapse at the time, those synapses cannot form properly. That's the message. That's where we run into trouble with the teen brain and its development. Because as they go through the teen years, let's say this purple neuron is absolutely essential for the survival of this teen. What's going to happen is some of these endings are going to become more strongly connected to whatever they are synapsing on off screen. It's going to get stronger because it's so vital that those two things are connected. It's equally true that some of these connections are going to disappear. Particularly if this is not so important for survival, some of those synapses will be absorbed by the body, and that's called pruning. And so during the teenage years, you are altering the number of synapses, the number of connections between this one purple neuron and thousands of other neurons. And then you multiply this times 1,000 every day. And the big trouble is this: you're not aware of it. You don't feel it. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. You cannot sense it. And one of the things that's very true about teens, if they are not able to sense it, it's irrelevant to them. That is a fair comment about the average teen. If they can't sense it, it doesn't exist. So they are not even aware that this is happening. All right, so I've tried to make the point. The teen brain is pruning, changing connections at an incredible rate. It's becoming more efficient. Again, this is happening daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. It is a powerful process. The moment you put alcohol and other drugs of addiction into that synapse, into that forming connection, you are interfering with the process. It is now possible to measure the interference. On a separate presentation, we can go through the really powerful experiments and data and how they cleverly are able to measure the impact of alcohol and other drugs of addiction on teen brains, particularly with brain scans. Fascinating how they can do that. The thing that I want to be clear on, we are talking about if a family member has, at a wedding, everyone is celebrating and the teen has a glass of champagne. I am not saying that teen just screwed up their brain for life. I am not saying that. I can't say that. That's not right. The problem we run into is what comes next. And as parents, that's the thing we really got to focus on. What comes next? Because if that teen is at the wedding and they have the glass of champagne and everything is good, and then that teen does not go on to become drinking regularly, once a week, once a month, twice a month, and binge drinking and consuming to great excess, then we're okay. The problem is oftentimes that one drink can lead to behavior that is detrimental to this process of forming synapses. So, yeah, we are talking about the long-term effects, and I want to pause here and just highlight for us. If we had time, and I made this interactive, such that I gave you a piece of paper and told you to write down, and I named some recreational drug. If I told you to write that down and say, give me the symptoms, how would you know a person walks in the room, how would you know that they were inebriated? Or how would you know they had to consume to excess some other drug? You would write down symptoms. And all of those symptoms are explained by the short-term effects of the drug in the synapse. Every single drug has its effects by affecting the synapses. What we're highlighting here is the long-term effects. And these long-term effects are so prevalent in the adolescent brain because of the connections that they're trying to form. You know what? Let's do it old school. New pathways are developing in the brain. I tried to make that point to you. So if you have the alcohol or other drug of addiction present while that is forming, that synapse is going to require the presence of that substance in order to work properly. It becomes reliant on that substance. And in particular, as I tried to make the case, it's the excess consumption, the regular excess consumption that really messes this up. The earlier you start consuming things like alcohol, nicotine, more on that in a moment, THC, you are creating connections that are reliant on that substance in order to work properly. You take it away, those synapses are not going to work properly. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This is why we get the 30% increased likelihood of all addiction. Great analogy. That was perfectly timed. Come on. There we go. Great analogy. Building this house. Think about the joining of the roof, the walls, the inner walls. All of that joining is made very carefully with hopefully, very sturdy, robust materials to join these things together. If you choose instead, that business of using screws and nails, nah, let's not go with that. Let's use Post-it notes. Yeah, that's it, Post-it note glue. It's kind of sticky, but not too sticky. That is a terrible way to build this structure. And it is such a great analogy. If any of you are ever struggling to have an analogy of what we're trying to describe here, this is it. You are building a structure that's supposed to be very sturdy, and you are not joining it together well if the addictive substances are present while you're trying to put these walls and this roof together. Now, another analogy that Cynthia very much likes, and I like for the following reason, think about you pour the pad of cement and people, organisms of various kinds walk across it. That becomes indelible now. That is imprinted into that cement. That's very similar to what we're describing here. The addictive substance in the presence of the synapse while it's forming or strengthening or weakening, whatever it's doing, that becomes indelible in the way that so does the cement. Now, the thing that I really, really like about this analogy is that oftentimes people will ask, is it reversible? If you have a teen that is binge drinking or is traveling down the addicted path, if we interrupt that process, have they irrevocably changed their brain? And to be honest, the answer is maybe. You don't know. Because if some of the alterations, say on this concrete pad, these imprints that look like a bird, these are not very deep. They're not very permanent, if you will, because just simple wear and tear, they can be worn off. They can smooth down. So maybe that represents alterations that are reversible. But now this footprint, I imagine this is pretty deep. That is probably not going to be easily reversible. So some are, some are not. You don't know. You need to interrupt the process, yes, but in the end, whether or not it's irrevocable, that we can't say a priori. So specifically, doing good on time, I wanted to give you information. I'm going to break this down into 3 groupings. And by the way, I feel also very much compelled to acknowledge Nina. Nina Wood, please stand up. I'm sorry to embarrass you. She is a still an undergrad, soon to graduate from UW-Madison. She is so much responsible for a lot of information that we've been posing to her. We send her off, go into the research and go find the answer to this question. And she has been remarkably good at coming back with answers. So much of what we're showing is due to Nina. Yay! All right. Wow, I wasn't even near it. Come on. There we go. All right. So, a typical brain, 8 to 10 years old. What can we say about it? It's at full size. Did you know this? That your brain, about 8 years old, your brain is as big as it's going to get. And that's because your skull, this hard case, that's as big as it's going to get. So it's not going to get any bigger. But through the remaining years of life, what can change is the processing power. And that's through the synaptic pruning and strengthening that I was describing earlier. Their limbic system, this is developing. The limbic system is where emotions are. Yes, we do need emotions as humans. Many teens ask me this question of why do we have emotions? I don't like this sadness business. I just want to be happy. Turns out it's really important that we have emotions because we need to figure out what makes us happy. That promotes survival. We need to know what makes us sad. That does not promote survival. And young children, young kids, through their teen years need to figure that out. That's part of the limbic system being developed. They are getting their survival skills. Parents, biologically, your children are supposed to leave you. I know that's not the greatest message, but they are supposed to leave you eventually. Now, what goes wrong? 8 to 10 years, it happens. And oftentimes it happens through nicotine. So highlighting nicotine, what is that going to do to the 8 to 10-year-old brain? It turns out that this is really early initiation. We are really in danger of having long-term adverse effects here. These adverse effects include increased impulsivity and inattention. So nicotine exposure at this very young age, and it happens, especially with the vaping products, this is really going to impact the impulsivity and the inattention. And oftentimes it's through vaping. This induces withdrawal symptoms and deficits in social cognition. These are things that go wrong. You can get poor working memory in the coming years, poor working memory, poor higher order thinking. I had you tell me that 2 + 2 is 4, and I walked you through a couple just simple steps. Some of those steps could still happen, but they're going to happen more slowly and maybe not to completion. These are all things that go wrong with exposure to nicotine at this young age. Let's go to the 12 to 19, the teen years that we're really focusing on today. What's the brain status? Their reward emotion centers, they are developing even faster. They are connecting even more through the synaptic pruning. The prefrontal cortex, this thing that allows us to make executive decisions, that's coming up more slowly. That's not keeping pace with the reward emotion centers. This explains why the teens make such impulsive, I saw it blink, make impulsive choices. They are reward impact driven. I'm wondering what my computer is driven by. Emotional development. This is why teens are so moody and volatile. Again, not the best message, but the truth. There's a reason why teens are moody and volatile. They're supposed to be. They need to test things out. And sometimes we have to allow them, we have to be patient, and we have to allow that to happen. Prefrontal cortex is starting to develop. And we see this, you hopefully see this as well if you have teens around you. They can begin to utilize abstract thinking. They can grasp the concept of delayed gratification. They can be goal-oriented. It's not totally there yet, but it's coming in that and when we do see it, we celebrate it. What goes wrong? Let's highlight nicotine first. What goes wrong? 12 to 19 years old. You get the emotional takeover by the nicotine. They are especially sensitive to withdrawal symptoms. And you can imagine if a person is especially sensitive to withdrawal, the moment they start to feel withdrawal, they're consuming again. They are especially sensitive to it. This comes up so often. You see people who, as teens, were vaping, and it's just vaping. It's not a big deal. At least it's not cigarette smoke, right? How many of them eventually become cigarette smokers? It is astounding. When the numbers are taken and counted for and the surveys are completed, it is astounding how many of them eventually become cigarette smokers. This nicotine, this can oftentimes synergize with other drugs in terms of the rewarding effect. THC is a great example of that. And one of the big problems right now is the availability of vaping products that not only have nicotine, but also THC as well. THC is the active ingredient in cannabis. These things synergize. And last point here for nicotine. It is absolutely true that oftentimes teens will tell you that they are consuming addictive substances because they need them to feel better. They are self-medicating. That is true, and that does happen. But what's becoming clear now is it's bidirectional. It's just not that the teen needs the nicotine for self-medication. It can actually be the teen is fine, but the vaping, the nicotine, the THC causes them to feel depressed if they don't get it. So it's bidirectional. It's not one way only, and that's an important message for everyone. It's not by our teens. Let's see if that works. We're back. Yeah. Okay. So, declarative memory is harmed. Declarative memory is the things you remember, like 2 + 2 = 4. When I memorize the states and their capitals, the capitals of the states, that's declarative memory. That's harmed by marijuana. Yes, it is. Ooh, it's really getting finicky now. Now, let's jump ahead to the adult brain. We're coming to the end of development, 20 to 25. Things are getting connected among and between the brain regions, those lobes I was highlighting earlier. You have better impulse control. You have decreased risk taking. That's all starting to be the dominant feature of this brain. The status, not only is it full size, but it's getting to be full functionality. This prefrontal cortex, this is now engaged much more, if not all the time. The ability to weigh risks and rewards, the ability to control your impulses, to have delayed gratification. This is all becoming the dominant feature. What happens now with exposure to alcohol and other drugs of addiction? Now you're going to get higher order thinking impaired. I cannot sing. I cannot dance. But you give me enough alcohol, and not only can I sing and dance, but you all need to see me do it. So I'm on the table with the lampshade. That's what happens at that point. Well, hopefully not. Much to the horror of my family members. So we say the damage can occur, but it's not as deleterious as to that teen brain. And great example of that, just let you read this for a second. Great example, eh? Poor decisions. All right, now, let's just pause for a moment. We got, according to the schedule, I got 2 minutes. I'm going to give you a little bit more upbeat information about the brain because it's about brain health, not just, drugs are bad. Let's have a little bit more information, but pause for a moment. That's a lot of talking. Questions, comments, observations, things I've agitated in you. I didn't agitate you at all? Mary, you're easily agitated. Question, please.
Now what? When we have this information and we're looking to get it to students in a preventative fashion, as well as to fashion some of our efforts around cessation. I think one of the challenges that we need to address as a school system are identifying the space and the resources that align well with this information to keep kids off this track and then to help steer kids back before they get caught into cycles of addiction. Where have you seen this take root in a really strong and effective fashion?
I would say a lot. That's a lot to unpack. Great point.
And we're in Wisconsin, which you identified as
I think
the worst of the worst in terms of a culture where this lifestyle is embraced.
absolutely. The number of people that celebrate on campus, the fact that we're number 49 or number 50 for alcohol consumption. Yay! No, that's the wrong end. It's not where we want to be. I want to be sure, things like that, I want to be sure to remember to say, I'm going to have it on a slide, but also around the walls what's this called? QR code. I don't have a phone, so this technology stuff baffles me. But that would be a great thing to put with, apparently if you zip, zap, zoop the code, something happens. But in any case, it's a survey. It's a survey. Okay. Just specifically, one of the longer standing coalitions and that I've been associated with, and I think has a really powerful program, is in Richland Center. I think they've been around a long time. They have a really well entrenched program of using resources and getting it out to their students. So that would be an example of someone that I think we're doing well to I don't mean to be. So Oregon Cares, I think, is following in their footsteps really well, I think, as an example. I really would like to comment on one of the huge goals of the coalition that is now becoming more and more doable now that we're starting to get feet on the ground is we are going to get more and more the students actually involved. Rather than being a coalition of just adults and parents, it's going to be involvement of groups here in the high school. Get them involved, get them doing things. That's huge, and that's been measured across the country. CADCA, whatever CADCA stands for. So many examples of that across the country. You get the high school students involved doing stuff, the buy-in goes way up. So that would be the huge thing that I would say. But I absolutely agree with you. I think that's one of the things we hope to do is get more and more resources and connections. Common theme today. Thank you. All right, so in the interest of time, we got about 10 minutes. I did want to say, it turns out it is very demonstrable that your brains are very much like your muscles, your skeletal muscles. When you exercise and care there for them in the proper way, not only do your muscles strengthen, but your brain can get more functionally complex as well. Both muscles and brains require rest between bouts of exercise. When they are overworked, they fatigue and function fails. This is common to both muscles and brains. And muscles are something you all can very much relate to, as can the teens. A really important goal that we've highlighted here in several different ways. It's all about taking short-term memory and making it into long-term memory. One of the messages that my students hate to hear down on campus, learning is hard. They don't want it to be hard, but physiology is a complex discipline. It is time-consuming work. And the singularly most important thing to promote long-term memory formation, learning, is sleep. And I think that's a really important point to make here with all of you today. Sleep is the most beneficial thing. If these alcohol and other drugs of addiction are so harmful to them, sleep is the complete opposite. And I just want to put a plug in for this book, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Of all the complex textbooks and tomes that I've paged through over the many decades of life, this one, this one is so very tractable. I think anyone could pick this up and start paging through it and get something out of it. It is just an amazingly well-written short book about what's known for sleep. Why is it 8 hours? What occurs during the 8 hours? The non-REM versus the REM sleep. This is just, I can't highlight this book enough for any of you that want to know or want to talk to anybody about sleep. You need to take a look at this book. Regular exercise also has great positive effects, not only on skeletal muscles, but as it turns out, regular exercise allows you to sleep better. So regular exercise improves sleep, therefore it both directly and indirectly and positively impacts memory formation. If all of this is the good stuff, let me tell you, ethanol, alcohol is the worst when we look at the experiments using neurons. So, again, not the goal here to make you into neuroscientists, but if ever anyone would like to have a conversation about exactly what is it in that synapse that's being harmed, here is a synapse of two neurons. And this diagram, stepwise, LTP, long-term potentiation. It is the molecular model of memory. It is what my students just took a test on 2 weeks ago. And it is absolutely astounding. We as human beings figured this out. We made these measurements. We figured this out. We can understand memory at the molecular level. Incredible. And ethanol blocks this. Yes, even 1 or 2 glasses of beer or wine impairs long-term potentiation. You can measure it in the lab. And the way it shows up for a lot of teens goes like this. They're trying to learn something, so they're studying. If they go to sleep, if they sleep on it, they consolidate, they make memories. LTP, long-term potentiation, occurs. Thank you. Come on. Thank you. Yes. No. That's so astounding to me. I'm going to wing it here in a moment because I don't want to run out of time. Here's the deal. If you are trying to learn something and you have that glass, a couple of glasses of wine, if alcohol follows your bout of studying, teens, then LTP does not happen. You have wasted every bit of your time. How many undergraduates at campuses across this country, how many of them will study? They'll go to the library. They'll be there working on their homework. They're writing their papers. They're reading. They're preparing. They do this for 4-6 hours. And then they say, hey, I'm 21. It's, oh, excellent. That has been going in and out repeatedly. They say, I'm 21. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to the bar. They have just wiped out every bit of their effort. They are going to have to relearn, restudy everything because they are not going to form LTP, long-term potentiation. And many of you are aware of this, but you didn't realize it in the context that I'm sharing with you. How many of you have witnessed people that drink alcohol to excess and the next morning they don't remember what happened? They don't remember what they did. They have blackouts. This happens because they drank so much, they even impaired short-term memory. Not just long-term memory, but short-term memory as well. Both of them get impaired if you drink enough, and that's why you get the blackouts. So that's a really important message to share. And go. Oh. Hi, Ben. All right, so how do I... So it's here but not there. I don't... I was feeling pretty good about him. He graduated. Yay! Oh, he is so happy. God, he loves playing. Anyway, next thing, in terms, in hopes of time. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, especially using this analogy of brains and muscles, I want you to be aware that training your muscles is very much like training your brain. Think about the following scenario. I tell each of you, you have got to run a 90-mile race. No, let's make it shorter. You got to run. You got to run a race. And in order to do that, over the next 2 months, what I want you to do is I want you every day to run a little bit. And then once in a while, maybe once a week, oh, thank you. So they need nutrition, hydration. Nice. Here it is. Okay, to run this race, how could you train for it? Plan A, you run every day, you run a little bit, and periodically you spike and you do a little bit more intensive running. And then before the race day, you take a little time off, you have a rest. That's plan A for how to run this race that you need to run in order to get a good grade in my course, for example. Now, plan B, you could procrastinate, and then you feel really guilty about procrastinating, so you run, you do some training, and then, okay, I don't have to feel guilty anymore. I did some training, so you procrastinate again, and now the day 28 is looming when the race is going to happen, so you start to get a little more regular, but because you were regular now, you don't feel guilty about it, so again, you procrastinate, etc. You end up with all of your training right before race day, and maybe even on race day, just to make sure you get all that training miles in, you run a little bit of then too. Common sense, folks. This is not going to be a successful race for you. This makes total sense. Everyone this resonates with. The thing is, it's exactly the same for brain training. And so talking to students, talking to teens about how do they go about using their brain for academic work. Let's say you have a few weeks to prepare for the exam. You've got 90 pages to learn. What is the best study pattern? This is what many students will do, and many teens will do. They will procrastinate, feel guilty about that, maybe spend a day looking at some material. Okay, I looked at material, I don't feel guilty anymore, etc. And they end up cramming. They end up cramming it all at the end. Even on exam day, they're still studying the material. Folks, none of that becomes long-term memory. It is all short-term memory. It is very stressful. It is not the way to learn. Brains are much like skeletal muscles. This is how to train your brain in the same way that you train your skeletal muscles. You study every day a little bit. Maybe you take a day off and then you test yourself. So you make it a little bit harder. You give yourself some test questions and you do this regularly. And the day before that test, maybe you take the day off, or maybe you just kind of lightly review, but you're getting enough sleep, especially getting enough sleep. So when exam day comes, you are best prepared. This is our mantra: consistent, persistent effort throughout the day, for every day, many days. That is a great mantra, not just for skeletal muscles and training, but also for how your brain best can be utilized. And folks, I would say even more than our teens and our high school students, I think we should be thinking about adopting this kind of philosophy as well, for us as well. We are very good at not getting enough sleep. We are very good at, I'll worry about that later. We are very good about prioritizing. And prioritizing oftentimes is another word for procrastinating, because things are building up. I wish there was a way to not have that happen. All right, so I'm going to finish on time. Messages. Be well, please. I hope in the past 50 minutes I've given you some information that helps you be well, for you, by you, with you. It really is about communication amongst all of us and our teens. Use this information to be productive supporters of the youth and our community. That's what our coalition work is about, and what we really are trying to promote. That famous old line, live long and prosper, I think is so very true. I know it doesn't resonate with many people anymore, but I just think that if ever there was a coalition message, I think that's it. All right, so please, thank you for attending this and listening to me and watching our technology challenges. Please fill out a short survey. I remember this. It's really short. I've been confirmed. Have I looked at it? I'm sorry, I didn't look at it. 3 questions. Excellent. All right, so it is 6:22. I think we have 2 minutes. If there's any questions or comments, I would be glad to answer them or talk about them.
Would you consider sharing the presentation with us if we gave you an email?
Absolutely. In fact, I think the question was, would I share the slides? Yes. I think, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to be not so arrogant. Nina, are you comfortable with that? Okay. So, yes, I think through the coalition, we'll get it to everyone.
Let's reverse this. What have you learned from the teens you've worked with?
Oh. In 2 minutes. I have learned that a lot of teens are silent, and they have thoughts. And it is very difficult to get those thoughts out of them. And in order to agitate them, to get those thoughts out of them, sometimes those are the most productive conversations ever. I will give you an example. I think this is a great way to reveal what's going on. There was a student, this didn't happen this year, this was several years ago, at one of the high schools, said, "So, I don't agree with anything you said, because marijuana is a natural plant product, so you have to let me use it because it's natural." And it just occurred to me that is absolutely correct. It is a natural plant product. Absolutely. Well done, young man. However, please come tell me, why do you think the marijuana plant makes THC, this psychoactive compound? Why does it make that? And understandably, the teenager said they don't know. And I said, well, I will share with you. Maybe you didn't know this. The plant makes THC because it kills things. It is an insecticide. It is a fungicide. It is a bactericide. It is meant to keep the animals from eating it. That's why marijuana makes THC. It is meant to kill things. So yes, it is a natural plant product. So you are naturally killing yourself with a natural plant product. Way to go. Things like that led to some of the best conversations, because maybe I didn't change that person's mind, but I certainly gave them some information, something to think about. Yes? So I would share that. What else am I hearing in 1 minute? I'm hearing that a lot of people are on board with the legal drinking age being 21. They're on board with that, but they don't want marijuana or cannabis. They don't want that to be 21. A lot of teens want it to be younger. I'm getting that a lot. I'm also very worried about the number of young children that are getting access to the gummies that have THC in them, or ending up in the emergency room in dire straits. That is worrying me a lot, because they look like gummy candy. So I wanted to end on a positive note. All right, let's allow the next thing to happen. Thank you very much. And school board time.
All right, it is 6:30, so I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, March 13th, 2023, and we are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Here. Ms. Garrison? Dr. Lakuta? Here. Mr. LeBrun? Here. Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Wright? Here. Ms. Flanagan?
Present. Board does have a quorum, and I do have from Ms. Heitz that this meeting has been properly noticed, so we are good there. We have a full agenda tonight. We have our consent calendar. We have information items. Then we have 5 action items tonight. And then we'll have our normal reports, and then the board will go into closed session for 2 items, and we will likely not return to open session, just to note that. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next on the agenda is our consent calendar. You do have in front of you, we have some retirements and resignations. I did want to note that David Piavanetti, our associate principal at the high school, is retiring after 3 years of service, and then Deborah Elmer is retiring as a science teacher at OHS after 10 years of service. So we want to make sure to note those retirements and thank those individuals for their contributions to the Oregon School District. All right, we also have the following donations, which I will read. We have the donation of a used Pearl student bell kit, $200 estimated value to the OSD band program from Amy Rohn. We have a used instrument, which is a flute and a cornet from Carolyn Sanders to the OSD band program, and then a $50 donation for the splash pad from Keith and Sandra Shotliff. So with those donations, we want to thank those individuals for their contributions, and then I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Moving on to public comment. I will read the following about public comment. District Policy 180.05 provides an opportunity for the public to address the board. We value the public comment period and feedback from our stakeholders. To comply with the open meetings law and to ensure consistency, public comment will have the following parameters. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their comments. Ms. Heitz will signal the speaker when their time is up, and the board will not comment after each speaker and will reserve discussion to any items on the agenda. Speakers are welcome to stay for the meeting. And then next steps following public comment may include referral to the appropriate administrator for follow-up with the speaker or placement of the matter on a future agenda. So each person, when called upon, will give their name and address or the name of the group that they represent, and public board or committee meetings are not a forum for identifying, presenting, or processing complaints or grievances involving individual staff members. Concerns involving individual staff members should initially be brought to the attention of the staff member's immediate supervisor and or submitted as a complaint to the district administrator or the district administrator's designee. So we do have one person here for public comment, Sherry Pollock. Sherry, if you want to come up to the microphone.
And then you're going to want to speak kind of closely to it so it picks up your voice.
Thanks. Hi. Am I on? My name is Sherry Pollock, and I am here as the Executive Director of the Oregon Area Food Pantry. As you know, the Oregon Area Food Pantry is a nonprofit, secular local agency with the mission to provide food and basic necessities to those in need who are residents of the Oregon School District. Now, we all know that children need nutritious food to learn and succeed at school. The federal and state government has failed to adjust the income eligibility levels to qualify for free and reduced school meals or provide universal free meals like they did during the COVID public health emergency. As a result, 32 OSD families who applied for free or reduced meals were ineligible because their household income was a couple $100s or less over the income requirement. That's gross income, not post-tax. While there is a small fund administered by Orchards to pay lunch balances, from what I've heard, it is typically exhausted in the first month of school. We know there are children in this school district who do not eat breakfast or lunch because their families cannot afford it. I have a short fact sheet that I've distributed to all of you that describes some of the actions the Oregon Area Food Pantry has taken over the last 18 months to address food insecurity among students at OSD. This school year, OAFP assumed responsibility from the Friends of Oregon School District for the former school lunch backpack program, what we now call the Food for Break program. Our donors fund this gift card program to assist families with food during school breaks of 2 days or more. We spend over $17,000 each school year to provide gift cards to over 200 students. We also open the food pantry to those families when they pick up their gift cards, so they may take additional food and register with the pantry. This helps them have a regular supply of nutritious food and essential items. But this still leaves children out who just miss the school meal income qualifications. One of our pantry board members was asked by a group what some of the most pressing needs were. She responded with information about this crisis. As a result of this ask, several community members stepped up, dug into their pockets, and donated $22,700 to the Oregon Area Food Pantry for the exclusive purpose of paying for school meals for these families who have just missed qualifying for free or reduced meals. In consultation with Sarah Tomasevich, the school nutrition director, I have developed a process for OAFP to provide the funds to the school district to cover these expenses between March 1st and the end of the school year. This OAFP school meal program means these families will no longer need to worry about their children going without breakfast or lunch. The total cost for the Food for Break program and the OAFP school meal program is approximately $130,000 per year. We are asking the board to treat OAFP in the same way Friends of Oregon School District is treated as it relates to the school fees payment portal. We would like to be listed in a similar way so that families can conveniently provide financial support to the Food for Break program and the OAFP school meal program. And the fact sheet has further information about various things that we've been doing with the school, collaborating with the school.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pollack. All right, is anyone else here for public comment? Anyone else here for public comment? Okay. Moving on to the OEA report. We do have an OEA representative here, but they do not have comment this evening, so we'll move on to student report. And Nathan Payton could not be here this evening, so we will move right on to see action items. So the first item is the 2022-2023 calendar update. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So as you can see from the purple on this particular item, that what we are asking for from the board in this action item is to update the 22-23 school year calendar to make June 9th an in-person instructional day. And that, of course, bumps the staff professional development day to June 12th. And for that particular day, that's really things that people have to do to wind up the year. So if people finish out what they need to do early, they have until the end of June to put in the 8 hours of work that would comprise that day. So they have a little bit of flexibility on that too. And that is our recommendation based on the fact that we've had a very snowy winter.
All right, any clarifying questions for Dr. Bergstrom before a motion is put on the floor? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve that recommendation from the administration.
I move that we add June 9th as an in-person instructional day and April 7th to be repurposed as an at-home learning day.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. All right, thank you for all your work on snow days and figuring those things out. It's been a very difficult year, I know, and lots of things go into it. So if people have not watched the podcast about snow days, please do that because you get a lot of background information about why that's not a simple decision. All right, moving on to the 2023-2024 capital maintenance projects. I will turn it over to Dr. Bergstrom to introduce our speaker.
Well, thank you very much. And actually, I think I'm going to turn it over to Andy Weiland, because I'm sure Andy would like to be the one to introduce our colleague Zane.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So Zane Heitz is our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and Zane joined us a little bit before the pandemic, so I think we're into maybe year 4-ish now, maybe something like that?
4 this summer.
4 this summer, okay. Yeah. So he's going to kind of walk through some of the projects that we've done here in the last last year, as well as some of the projects that we have kind of on the horizon, and then I'll help him kind of talk through some of the ideas that we have related to increasing the budget for these purposes. So with that, Zane, you're up.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so we can start off as we normally do, kind of recapping some of the projects from the previous year. And actually, I'm going to say years. With the pandemic and other stuff, we've actually had a couple of projects that were last year, 2 years ago projects that weren't actually officially done. So I did want to bring some pictures of some of those 21, 22 projects. So the Orange Workroom at Netherwood got new ceiling, new lights, new paint, new carpet, new cabinetry. The RCI main office got carpet. We took wall covering and some other pieces off the wall and repainted those. And then we did some additional student lockers at the middle school. Those are actually in the I call it the science music wing, and for additional students. And then down below the orange ones are the new lockers in the boys' locker room. So those were kind of 2 years ago projects. So with how busy last year was, we did get one project fully complete from last year, which is the dust collector at the high school. So it's actually been a huge improvement. So the unit actually fully sits outside. The old unit on the left sat inside with these kind of dust bags and barrels, and those barrels filled up, and it was a pain in the butt. I think we set the fire alarm off at least once, if not maybe twice, kind of emptying that and everything. So this unit fully sits outside. It's got twice the amount of power to it. I don't think the Woods Lab has been cleaner than it ever has been. It actually recycles the clean air back into the building, so it doesn't cause any pressure issues or anything like that with the HVAC. So that has worked great so far. So a couple of projects from last year that are soon to be completed. The chiller replacement at the Prairie View is actually going to happen over spring break. They actually have to crane in the entire unit off and on the building. So for safety reasons, we kind of waited till spring break to get that done.
Why don't you mention when that was supposed to be done?
That was supposed to be done around Thanksgiving. It took till late January, early February to actually get the unit that we ordered, almost a year ago, actually here into Wisconsin and actually be ready to put it in place. So that's kind of why that was still sitting there. So the HVAC upgrades for the Netherwood and the pool, they're kind of all designed and ready to go. They're just waiting till spring break to kind of push them into the new system, just in case there are any hiccups or different things we need to deal with. We kind of have a couple days to test everything to make sure it's good to go before the kids are back. The high school tennis court replacement project will start late May, so we've been working with Jim and Brittany to get that started right after boys tennis is done. Work through the summer so that it is ready for girls tennis. That's another one of those projects that we had contract signed, ready to go last summer, and they're like, great, we'll probably get it done, early October. And we're like, yeah, that's not really going to work for us. So unfortunately, we had to push it off till this year, but we do got everything lined up. And then hopefully in April, maybe May, we'll start on the solar project for the solar panels on top of the pool. So, yep. So some of that stuff from 2020 is still affecting 2021 into 2022. So hopefully we're out of that here shortly. So I know Andy has prepped you guys a little bit on some of these items, but I wanted to go through a couple different facts, couple pieces of information, some of the stuff that me and him have been talking about here over the last probably 2 years, almost 3 years since I've been here. He kind of told me, I've been kind of telling him, hey, it's going to be hard to keep stretching the $600,000 with the amount of buildings we have, square footage we have, some of these bigger projects we have coming up. And so he said, well, hey, put together a list, 5-year plan of what you think you kind of need, which I believe you guys have as part of your packet. That was kind of the exhibit A. And after really this first year of projects, the next 4 years, there's not a whole lot of exciting things. It's roofs, it's parking lots, it's HVAC. You know, that's not touching flooring, it's not touching any remodels, it's not touching anything sustainability related. It's not really touching anything safety related, which we've been able to use the referendum money from Forest Edge for safety related stuff. That's eventually gonna, you know, dry up, and we're gonna need another source for that to keep moving forward. So it's not a whole lot of, you know, pizzazz to it, but it's almost about $1.3 million a year, just to kind of keep us in line, ahead of stuff breaking down, and keeping the buildings where, you know, I think you guys expect them to be at. So he asked me to do another piece, which is kind of like a more, hey, what do you think we can do, kind of in the middle ground between what you're asking for and the 600, and we kind of work towards this 850 budget. So on this one, again, a lot of the extra pieces were kind of stripped away to make it work. And again, after this year, there's really only roofing and parking lot projects, and that's still eating that whole budget up. So sorry, yep, Exhibit B. So I kind of put all the projects that really aren't going to be able to get touched in the next 5 years, you know, kind of down at the bottom that had to get stripped off. So the reason why these numbers are so big, as you can see, with the now 8 total buildings, we have over 1 million square feet of floor space, over 900,000 square feet of roofing, and almost 900,000 square feet of asphalt. So when you start to look at this as kind of a per year replacement cost, roofing, you can get 25 to 30 years, asphalt, 20 to 25 years. Flooring greatly varies on what you're able to get out of it. But when you start to take this square footage of roofing divided by 30 years, that's almost 30,000 square feet of roofing we should be replacing every year to kind of stay in line with everything. Just that cost alone is, you know, $450,000. You can see the asphalt with parking lots, kind of a $5 square foot replacement cost. Same thing with flooring. I mean, those three things combined, you know, is almost $770,000 a year. So you can start to see why some of my concerns are with the $600,000 budget and how we're going to keep up with some of this stuff. So like I said, we were at a $600,000 budget. What we have proposed this year is an $850,000 budget. Andy kind of asked me, like, hey, what would your future recommendation be? And it's probably a big number that you're seeing there, the 1.25 million. But just to give you a little bit of an idea, I kind of broke it down a little bit, kind of almost per year, what the goals or kind of what things would go to between roofing, asphalt, flooring, remodel projects, you know, / building upgrades, HVAC, indoor air quality upgrades, the energy saving, sustainability piece, and then like safety and security. You know, those aren't going to be the exact numbers every single year. One might be bigger one year to the next year, but just to give an idea like how I built that number. So for this year, we do have an $850,000 budget proposal, and we can go through our projects for this year. Brooklyn Elementary, we're proposing the gym, the main gym, the penthouse, and the first, second, third grade wing, the re-roofing project. So if you can see in the other two pictures, you can actually see where the roof is actually deteriorating to the point where it's pulling the coping, the metal piece at the top, over and in, and it's actually pulling masonry bricks out of the wall and starting to turn them. So it's going to be a roofing / masonry fix project there. So Netherwood, we're looking to add some windows to the upstairs imagination station. This gets used a lot by early childhood. The wall that you're looking at there is an exterior wall. It does face kind of Gorman's red brick building. So there is an opportunity to really add some natural light to that space. I think it's going to enhance that tons. So Rome Corners, we kind of have two specialty projects a little bit. So for safety concerns, we're looking to extend the sidewalk around the bus loop all the way over to South Burr Oak. Right now, the bus loop is used all the way around for buses, but the kids get to a point like in that bottom picture where the sidewalk stops and they literally have to walk on the asphalt to kind of get around to the side, where if we can have that sidewalk with the curb and everything, it's just going to enhance the safety for those kids. We're also looking to do an expansion of one of the bathrooms at RCI. We've got a student coming over that has some larger equipment that it just does not work in any of the current restrooms we have there. So we're looking to take what we have there and kind of extend it out and give them more room for all the equipment and the pieces they need to give that student the.
While you're on that slide, you'll see another future project. You can try to figure that out. If you look at the pavement, it's in pretty bad shape. The buses have basically worn a path into the pavement over the last 22 years.
The Oregon Middle School, we've patched this numerous times over the last couple of years, but we're looking to actually replace the parking lot in the main drop-off area and the staff lot kind of in front of the building. As you can see, it gets a lot of wear and tear with drop-off and traffic and stuff, and it's definitely at the end of its life cycle there. Another roofing project here at the high school is the field house, which is the white roof, and then there's the small section of white roof next to it. So this is not as old as some of the other roofs, but the white roof is a TPO roof. It's more of a plastic roof. It was very popular in the late 90s, early 2000s. I put a bunch of them on in my past career. The problem is they don't hold up as great in northern climates. The weather change of the blazing sun to the freezing cold starts to take the rigidity out of it, elasticity out of it, and it starts to become rigid. And that one is kind of the point of failure. If we get a hailstorm, that roof would probably not have a chance of surviving the impact of that hail and stuff. So this is one of the more expensive kind of per square foot roofing projects because there's already 2 layers of roofing on this roof. So they actually have to completely tear it off down to the metal deck and then build it all back up with the insulation and protection board and then the new roof. So we also have some carpet replacement in the business classrooms and offices. There's a lot of spots, as you can kind of see in the pictures, that are already loose and starting to wrinkle and starting to become a safety hazard for students and staff. We also have a little work to do at the running track. We're going to recoat lane 1. That obviously gets the majority of the traffic there. Patch the holes that we have issues with, and actually repaint the lines. For those who use the track, it's desperate need of a little bit of a TLC, and I think the repainted lines are really going to make that pop again. So this is probably about the last patch, recoat, repaint that we're going to be able to do on that track before, that's going to come due like the tennis courts have in the next 4 to 5 years as well. So at the pool, we're looking to do some flooring replacement in the front lobby. Nothing really survives at the pool great. That environment is a tough one for anything, and the floor is one of those things that has kind of taken some brunt of the use over there. So we do plan to do some walk-off mat in the front to get rid of the 4 to 5 rugs that are there. If you want rugs there, we'll put some good flooring there for that, and then find a good hardy floor that's going to take the damage and the beating from the chlorine, kind of that hallway down to the main entry into the pool. So, and then we do have a couple kind of district-wide projects. Like the controls upgrade that we're doing at Netherwood, we are looking to do that at a couple other buildings. Andy did have a funding source that covered most of that cost, but we are kicking in a little bit of money to get the rest of the buildings done, so we'd be completely on the new updated system. We are looking to do some additional parking lot patches, repairs, and repainting. We do have some year-to-year maintenance money inside the normal operations budget, but with where we're at on some of these lots and the fact that we do need to get a couple more years out of them, I'm looking to put some additional funds into those as well. Kind of the same thing on the roofing repairs and patching. Yes, we do have some money in the maintenance budget, but we're going to need to try and get some extra years out of some of these roofs, so we are going to have to put a little bit extra into the maintenance of them. So, oops. So.
Andy, do you want to go into the budget piece of this before we open it
Sure.
up for questions?
You bet. As I mentioned in the agenda item, this is something that's been on our radar for some time, and I know some board members have had some concerns as well. When the passage of the referendum that allowed us to look at things a little bit differently, we had a 20-year bond that was out there called for non-referendum debt. It was actually what was called the unfunded liability from the pension system. So 20 years ago, it's crazy I can say that, but 20 years ago we refinanced that liability that was out there from the employee trust funds. It was at an 8% interest rate, so it made a lot of sense. And when we did that, we actually saved over $10 million. And then we were able to refinance that 10 years later and saved another couple $1 million just because the interest rates kept going down. The gist of this is that payment, we made that last payment or are about to make that last payment. It's here in March, and it will be done. So the money that we're using to fund that bond will come free. We actually have talked about this a couple times. We're spending over, I think, around $120,000 or so to continue to fund 2 social workers that you might remember we added during the pandemic. So they're moving off of fund balance. Essentially, they were set aside for fund balance from the savings that we were able to glean from the first year of the pandemic. They'll be moving on to that revenue source to continue to fund them. That still leaves about $200,000, $250,000 left in that payment. And so what we're proposing here is to add that $250,000 to the $600,000 to get to the $850,000 budget. Not where Zane would obviously like it to be, but at least it's a step in the right direction so that we can start to address some of these needs a little bit better.
All right, I will open up the floor for questions, a lot of clarifying questions, I'm sure. So we can go around the horn. Go ahead, Troy, if you want to start.
First of all, just a comment, Zane. I really appreciate how you laid out the per year replacement costs on roofs and kind of using that 25-year lifespan. So we get, because that really helps us get a true understanding, I think, of what an annual cost should be, knowing that we don't do those things neatly every year, but they do build up. I guess my question is really regarding Exhibit B and some of the things that are not proposed to be completed in the 5-year plan, specifically the VAVs. Can you just talk about what those are, what the return is if we were to do those?
Yeah, so VAV stands for variable air volume. So the way the HVAC systems mostly work in most of our building is you have an air handler that has a fan that's taking the air and pushing it out through the ductwork into different zones. Depending on the school here, I think there's almost 30 different zones. So that will push it out to the different rooms. That some of them have heating and cooling, some of them just have heating. So that's going to give you a constant temperature, constant volume air. How you kind of individually deal with comfort in each room is there's a thermostat, and then there's most of them have VAVs, so that the air goes through. It can actually take the air and make it less or more depending on what the room's need. If it's got reheat in it, it actually can heat the air up if the room's asking for additional heat. So that kind of individualizes each room on what they get for comfort. Where this kind of came up to an extent is as we hit the pandemic, we started talking about air exchanges and how can we increase that and what can we do. These rooms that really didn't have that control just had that constant volume. So it's an extent, it's kind of like sitting in your car with either cranking the AC all the way up or turning the temperature all the way down. The VAV allows you to start to actually control the intensity of it as well. So
And do you have an understanding of like what the payback would be, say like Brooklyn, $75,000 to add those to older areas? I mean, what's our payback period, or what's the return on that? Do we know?
It's hard to say to an extent. Part of this is a comfort thing of being able to give the different classrooms the individual level of changing temperature. I do think there will be a payback to it, because you can start to now work at lowering your output temperature of your air handlers, and then letting the VAVs kind of individually raise that a little bit. So I don't have an exact number for you, but it's kind of two pieces there. So
okay.
I would say that we're fighting that a little bit in this area of the pandemic, because we've been actually increasing airflow, and the VAV allows us to kind of do that as well. So from a savings perspective, it's not there as strongly if we're providing the amount of air exchanges that we have been wanting to do because of the pandemic.
Just to kind of piggyback on part of Troy's question, as we look at some of this, is there any, energy efficiency grants, infrastructure from the federal government or state funds that would help us with any of this?
Potentially, the controls might qualify for some focus on energy funds, that type of thing. We have taken advantage of that. I don't know if you remember, but last year we did do some lighting type things, and we took advantage of that. But those LEDs are becoming so normalized now that people aren't really providing the incentives that they used to. Those incentives have gone down. So we can definitely look, and we'll look at, for the controls perspective, if there's any focus on energy dollars. The solar, absolutely, that is actually last year. That's in the infrastructure, the IRA, I forgot what it stands for.
Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, Inflation Reduction Act. That actually has significant amount of money in there. We've factored that into the equation. But the majority of this is just maintenance.
All right. Go ahead, Heather.
There we go. Yep, I just have a question. It might be more for Andy on, for these projects that aren't being completed in a 5-year plan, like what happens if this $200,000 cooling unit at OMS cuts out and can't be repaired?
We fix it on an emergency basis.
Be repaired.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's been repaired a few times, and it was installed in '89, so it's getting up there.
Right.
Yeah, we're just band-aiding it along right now.
Living on borrowed time.
Absolutely.
So that is that, and just really realistically, when that happens, is that you're coming back to the board to say, okay.
We would probably look at the full operations and maintenance budget and see how we're doing on everything, and then if there's no chance, then we coming back to you and potentially asking for contingency funds, which there's $50,000 that we budget each year, to see if we could tap into that.
Got it.
We also, we get creative. Like, we didn't talk about this, but that chiller that's going on Prairie View, the chiller's not going to, all the parts of that chiller that is coming off of that roof isn't getting thrown away.
Right.
We're kind of harvesting it for the main parts, because we have an identical one at Brooklyn.
Right.
And at the same age and everything else, that we use those parts in case.
I have no doubt that you all are being thrifty and wise and doing what you can.
Much as we can.
I just was curious if worst case, which I hope doesn't happen.
Yep.
What would be the next step? And go ahead.
The only thing I was going to say is, luckily, the cooling season for us is not as long as the heating season.
Right.
So.
And then my other question is kind of more pie in the sky and maybe off topic, since it's not related. Well, it's related, but in addition to what we're talking about here, is all of these things, seem like needs, right? There's not a lot of wants. I mean, I guess the windows you could say is a want, but understandable that natural light is not a luxury, right? It should be in the need category. Where is the time where there's things on your list for us to understand as a board that there are other things that may need to happen that are not, I don't know, maybe I'm not making sense, but how do we know the big picture, right? This is very like absolute white knuckle, need it.
Yep.
what else is out there and how do we learn about that?
I mean, I got a folder about that thick on my
I have
desk.
no
Every
doubt.
year we sit down with, all the buildings and go through stuff. And lately it's been, hey, give me your list. It's probably not going to happen because, we've got some pretty significant,
Right.
have to happen kind of things here. So
To that point, though, I think what the Vision community is doing
Yeah.
in terms of our facilities review and a facility study, that kind of gets at yours. So we've hired heirs. Leslie, do you want to talk about that in terms of how that feeds into this?
Sure, because what you see here is a 5-year plan for maintenance pieces related to the facilities, but the AIR study is looking at all components of the facilities in our district, including things that aren't necessarily listed here, like recreational facilities. And how does that all fit into one big package that would be multi-year in pursuing? And seeing that some of these very things that are pretty foundational to the operation, they would definitely have to come before some of our bigger picture plans to improve recreational facilities.
Anna, go ahead.
Wanted to piggyback a little bit on kind of where Heather was going. Are there other, funding sources at a building level that allow for some of this operational stuff to happen? I mean, these are big capital projects. Are there other sources that are being used at a building level, for maybe a smaller project that may not land on something like this, that might give us another bigger picture of things that are happening at a maybe smaller level in the schools? I'm just curious if there are other things going on that aren't necessarily represented here.
There are much, much smaller projects where a building may say, hey, we'd really like this to be done. And what Zane and I will do is, okay, we'll fund half of it type of thing. But we're talking about something that, is a couple $1,000s, not what we're talking about here.
Sure, right.
So otherwise, this is the major funding source for all the capital maintenance type things. So carpet in an area or something, or trying to think of.
One thing I've started asking is buildings is, hey, if you've got smaller projects that probably don't fit what we're looking here, let's talk about them and price them, because once we get to the end of that, June-ish time frame where it's the end of the budget, maybe we got some money left over to do some of these smaller things, we try to do those. We did art countertops last year at, OMS. Nothing major, really not worth bringing it to you guys, but we were able to get it done for $5,000-$6,000, smaller projects like that. So we do try and grab a couple of those when we can, if there's, money left over.
I'm just trying to remember one of our last halvesies projects that we've done.
The last half-sea projects we did was at Brooklyn. I think they upgraded kind of their conference room. No, they did cabinetry in their movement room that we ended up going half-seas on with that. So.
Yep. And it wasn't that we didn't think that the cabinetry needed to get done. It was probably original to the building, but we hadn't prioritized it and anything else. And if you guys really want that, then we need some help to get there.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. That's it for me right now.
Okay, go ahead, Leslie, and then Mary, and then Tim.
So I have two questions. First is for Zane, the roofing in the field house. So you said to us that it's not really meant for winter climates like what we have.
Yes.
So what are we going to be replacing it with?
We're going to be replacing it with a different tested EPDM roof. It's a different type of roof. It's not white, it's black. It's what we've been doing pretty much on everything, even before I got here.
More longevity?
Yes, for longevity. It's a tried and true method that's been used for years up here. So
Perfect. And then the other one is more to Andy. So when we look at the two, A and B, and clearly there's a greater need than what you're asking for right now. What is you as the financial guy? What is your long-term kind of plan to get us to this point where we can actually take care of these things? Because maintenance is not something you can really ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. Zane and I were actually talking about that today, and we're like, well, I don't know that we're going to get to, 1.25 million, tomorrow or this year or whatever, but maybe if there's some flexibility in future budgets, maybe there's a way to kind of increase it marginally every year type of thing, or look, unfortunately, this situation that happened with this bond being done, there's no other bonds out there. So, I think I said, if there's a way we can increase the budget by $50,000 a year, that would be a win. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. But again, we're talking about staffing and everything else, and all that has to be prioritized. So we have to kind of figure that out. This state budget could go to really great to really bad. It's a really interesting place to be. Which I don't want to start talking about that budget, but it has some potential that we could maybe had more than $50,000 this year. But on the other hand, I know the board's also very concerned about taxes and property taxes and how that all impacts it. So I think, as we kind of work through this budget process, we're going to be talking to you and getting your thoughts on how we work that through.
So this is something you'll continue to come back with?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We thought today was kind of we had heard the board members being concerned. I've obviously been concerned in Zane. We thought that today was a good way to kind of just set the groundwork a little bit, and sharing the information on a square footage basis we thought was a fair way to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mary.
Well, so thank you, Leslie, for asking my first question about the field house roof. The next question I had, so Zane, you mentioned that the track, we probably have one repair job left, and then it'll have to be replaced. So when you gave the cost estimate for the asphalt, does that include the track? Is that asphalt, or is that some different?
It's a little bit different. It's not really included in this. So there's actually an asphalt layer below it, and then there's actually a coating on top of it. So in some of those pictures that you saw the track, like you can actually kind of see the asphalt underneath it. So if the asphalt's still in good shape, which for what you can't see, it seems to be in good shape, you might be able to just take the top layer off and redo that top layer. If there's spots in the asphalt you have to replace for the base of it, then you have to get into that too. So it's not really on this 5-year plan, because we're hoping that the work we're doing on it will give us that 3 to 4 to maybe 5 years. And there wasn't really another spot to stick it.
Right.
Anyways,
well, yeah. So that's my question is, let's say it needs to be replaced in 4 years. How much are we talking for a replacement of that?
We've gotten a couple budget numbers. I don't remember those off the top of my head. I don't know if you remember any of those numbers we kicked around.
I thought I don't remember if it was just the rubber or the pavement, but 120 sits in my head somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was a 121, 150-ish number. And I think that was more of just recoating with the asphalt kind of staying in place. So.
Okay.
It has lasted about 22 years, so it's given us a good life.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's
Tim.
Just picking up from the track conversation, are there opportunities at the parking lot level to do something similar as opposed to complete replacements? Can we route those and overlay them and buy 10 years as opposed to when we can incorporate it into, a bigger project with more permanent financing?
Yep. So one of the options that you can do is the parking lot is kind of built in 3 layers. It's a stone base. There's a layer of asphalt that's kind of a thicker layer that's called binder, and then there's a finish coat that's got smaller aggregate, so it looks nicer, called surface. There are times where you can actually mill off kind of the top layer and actually relay the top layer. What you need in that situation is a really strong and true base. Mm-hmm. Some of the pictures that you see, or if you see after a rain, you kind of can see those spider webs that kind of tells you that you probably have an issue all the way down through the base. And in most scenarios that we're at in some of these lots, milling it off is probably not going to, unfortunately, solve the problem. Mm-hmm. It might gain us a couple years, but it's probably not going to be worth putting the money into it for really getting a long-term, return on your money. Mm-hmm. So something like the high school or Brooklyn or newer spots, that don't have that many years on it, and we can keep up with the maintenance on it, that might be something to look at down the line. But a lot of these lots that we're looking at, RCI is 22-ish years old. That middle school lot, I'm assuming, is probably original to that building. You know, the Prairie View bus lot is got 20 plus years on it. So unfortunately, a lot of these lots are starting to hit the end of their lifespan. So.
Okay. You mentioned carpet. I know it's a minor thing, but I'm just, things have changed, just like roofing materials have changed. And I would imagine we're going with more carpet squares.
Yes.
So when things happen, the pictures that you showed, for instance, you could see that it's starting to roll up. It's obviously more of a traditional carpet as opposed to squares. Do we do that everywhere now? So that we can just track the patterns?
That's kind of our new standard, which really started kind of during the 15, 16 renovation stuff. So it's kind of it's called Kinetics. It's kind of it's commercial carpet. I don't think it's here, but a lot of the high school has it pretty much everywhere at Forest Edge has it. It is square, so if one square does get ruined, you just pull the square out and you can replace it. It cleans up well. It takes a beating. It's breathable, so it's it's not trapping moisture underneath the carpet or anything like that. And we've had good success with it. So that is a product we've started to lean towards for classrooms and stuff.
Bray recommended it, and it's actually the same carpet that they've had at Epcot.
Okay.
So
yeah, great.
It's something that's it's a little bit more expensive, but it's something that's gonna hold up.
The last thing, one thing I'm particularly anxious about is we have covered more and more roofs with solar panels. And if you look at the roof we have to replace, the big roof we have to replace here at the high school, what is the difference in cost for a roof with solar panels versus a roof without solar panels, assuming the solar panels have the same life expectancy as the roofing material?
So then the cost would just be basically dismantling the solar panels and taking them off the roof, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that we've identified that cost specifically.
What do we estimate the lifespan of our solar panels to be?
They pretty much mirror, it's like 25 years type of thing. So it pretty much mirrors the roofing materials. So that's why with the pool, we were kind of like eager to do that because we're like, hey, we put that on like a summer or two ago, and we really want to, if we want to get solar on there, we should get it on there so that the lifespan kind of is similar.
Sure.
If you talk to residential folks, it probably is, 5-6% would be my guess, something like that, to take it off. But I haven't experienced that yet. So.
Okay, it's just something because we have lots and lots of solar panels in this district.
Yep.
When the roofs have to be repaired,
yeah,
those got to come off.
I would say that we've got two unique situations where that's not exactly true. The solar panels that are right kind of next to us here above are actually on a steel structure above the gymnasium. We were trying different structures, and that's actually part of my presentation when I talk about what we've done here in Oregon is we were trying to learn different things. The good thing is we could roof right underneath it. The bad thing is because of the steel structure, there's penetrations all over the place. So that'll be a cost because you have to make sure those penetrations are sealed up. Yep. The other one is the middle school, which is our first roof. That's on a standing seam roof, metal roof. And so, those typically last 50 years or so. We haven't had any issues with it. And so that's been really nice. You don't typically see people taking metal roofs off very often. So as long as they get it on and get it sealed.
And other than from an architectural perspective, is there a reason why we don't do
metal seam roof?
Yeah,
it's just expensive, and it's a design element, right? Because there's a pitch to it, that type of thing. Not a traditional type of pitch like we do with the EPDM materials. So, it would be great if you could. Those things last forever.
But they're just super expensive.
And there's a design element to it that you have to make sure it works too.
Okay, that's all I have.
So just very quickly, the only places that we currently have those is Brooklyn, which was our first one where we put it on the EPDM roof, and then Forest Edge, which it's all over that roof. And it will soon be on the pool.
It'll be interesting to see. They do sell it as a way to actually add longevity to your life to your roof. All that sun that normally beats down on a black roof is hitting those solar panels. So it's going to be interesting to see, how that goes forward at a building like Forest Edge that had it, from day one.
And you know, the panels don't completely die, you know. I mean, there's a curve on them, their performance, as it kind of goes down steadily. So 25 years is kind of when they said it probably would make sense, plus the technology. You know, every year a solar panel comes out, it's better solar panels. But you know, I think you wait until the roof is shot at that point in time, and then that's when you're going to replace them. And it's not real hard, honestly. There's cinder blocks like that were made out of walls, and then it's just a real fairly light aluminum racking system is what the panels sit on. So it's not a huge big deal.
Just a couple things from me. I think, Zane, thank you very much for doing the 5-year capital plan. I think that's very helpful to the board. I think you've heard from the board that, and kind of what we talked about, what's happening in visioning is we really would like to see a long-term facilities plan, which is not only monetary, but also priority. And so I think that's some of the things that we've talked about in visioning that's already happening. So as we look into the future, we know what the possible projects are, but then we also need to hear from you what is priority based on need or instructional, or is it school district and athletics? You know, what are those criteria that we're using as a board to make decisions, because we're never going to have enough money to do everything. And so it helps us prioritize, kind of like we do with staffing plan. We have criteria that we look at. So I think, you know, that's the thing that you've started down the 5-year plan. And I think that's what we're doing in visioning too, is really coming up with what helps us make those decisions. So thank you guys for all your work on this. Dr. Bergstrom, anything further before we ask for a motion on the floor?
No, I'm just also appreciative of how far into the future we're looking and planning. And I think a lot depends on the state budget and what we're able to see happen there.
All right, any other questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the capital maintenance project for 23-24.
All right, is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none or hearing none, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Heather, I did not acknowledge that you were here. How was the concert?
Amazing. They do great things with kids. Incredible what all the students can do.
So Forest Edge, was it band or orchestra? All right. Great. So happy you could see that, and now you're here. All right, moving on to 2023-2024 staffing plan. Back over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. Gina will be walking you through the staffing plan. I just want to point out that you will see a couple of changes from the plan that was presented to you a few weeks ago. And that's because sometimes, and I'll speak to the high school directly, you can look at the just general numbers of students and make predictions. And then once you start to build the course matrix based on requests, things shift. So we made a couple of adjustments there, and Gina will walk you through that, and Mr. Planner's here tonight to answer any questions you may have about that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bergstrom. So if you'll recall, this is the first time that we've presented step 1 of the staffing plan in February since I've been here in the past 10 years, right? And the reason that we're doing that is we need to start planning earlier because it's just getting more competitive to recruit staff. So we want to get positions posted as quickly as we can. One challenge of that is that that timing doesn't always fit with high school and middle school planning of course requests. So that's part of the reason why you're going to see several new positions that we didn't talk about last time, right? So, and I don't want us to stop going early because that is really helpful for us, but just means we have to be a little bit more flexible. So with that, as Dr. Bergstrom talked about, it doesn't change the overall essence of our request. And you'll see here that we have a budget summary in the purple, and Andy Wallen, I know, will be happy to answer questions about that. When we were doing our planning for this, we did have 2 K-4 teaching positions for this year that were in the budget that we did not fill. So if you remember from last year, we typically will ask the board to approve certain K-4 positions because they're on what we call a watch list. So we're watching enrollment in the summer to watch our class section sizes. Or we're having staff that we have had attrition, so we wait to fill those positions to see if we need them. So we had 2 positions in the budget that we did not fill for this year because we didn't need to based on section numbers. And then we also have 2 positions that we are not going to fill sections for next year based on projections. So that leaves us with 4 positions in the budget that we can reallocate. And if you look at our student numbers, that makes sense because you'll see that with the declining birth rates, our class sizes have been smaller at the K-6 level, but that larger class size is slowly moving over to the high school. So you will see that in our proposal, we are looking to reallocate those K-4 positions to help our class sizes at the high school. So that does leave us with 1 position that we are hoping to reallocate, but we may need new money for, along with 1 other position, and I will talk about that shortly. So in terms of, we are asking the board tonight to approve the positions you will see in Table 1. Those are the ESSER positions that were funded with that one-time federal money. So we are looking to move those into a permanent funding in our budget. You will see the addition of 1 new position there, and that is at the bottom of the table, the emergent bilingual teacher. That position is new to this staffing report. The reason it is new is because in working with Cara on the budget, that position was actually approved in April of 2020 as a position in our regular budget. But that is when we were getting all the information about ESSER. It was during the pandemic. So before we filled that position, we learned we were able to use ESSER money to pay for that position. So the board had approved that as part of the regular budget process, but then we never actually used budget money to fund it because we were trying to use ESSER for everything that we could use it for during the pandemic. So I did just want to put that back on the list for you tonight to know that that is an ESSER funded position that we are continuing, but it was approved by the board in April of 2020. So we are asking the board tonight to approve those positions in Table 1. And then in Table 2, those are the positions that we are looking to reallocate with the previous positions we already have in the budget, except for the emergent bilingual teacher at the high school. That was partially funded with ESSER. So that is in our referendum budget. So we would be looking to take a little bit of money of reallocation to fund a teaching position. And then, as Dr. Bergstrom mentioned, instead of a math position, when we put all the pieces together, what we really need is an English position. And when we put all the pieces together, we looked that we were able to meet this year the students' math needs with our current allocation of staff. I don't know that we'll be able to do that next year. That is our hope. So just foreshadowing that for you. So we would be looking to add an English teacher, and then the science and the social studies teacher we've already talked about at our last meeting. And then we have a slight addition, which is for new money, and that is the 0.3 FTE at Forest Edge. And so that is a small amount of money, but we think it is really important to ask the board to approve that tonight, because when we opened Forest Edge, we really wanted our 5th and 6th grade students to have comparable experiences between FES and RCI. And so adding this position would allow us to have that small group instruction at Forest Edge, which is similar to RCI. We were hoping that we could do that with the current staff allocation that we have, but with the schedules that we have and the travel time, because we share that staff person with the middle school, we just weren't able to make that work. So that's why you see that as a new addition tonight. So looking for the board to approve Table 1 and the positions in Table 2. Dr. Bergstrom, what would you add?
That was very thorough. Thank you.
So Andy, do you want to address any budget? She addressed staffing. Why don't you talk with us about budget with these changes?
Yeah, so essentially what we're trying to do here is stay within the current allocation of positions that we have. And the reason that we're doing that is just to be super, let's say, conservative, in that we don't know what's going to happen with the state budget situation. So because we could get nothing or we could get more than nothing, but we don't know what that is, we're basically trying to stay within that allocation. The only exception to that would be be that 0.3 that we just added today. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. And I would also say, as I mentioned, I think in the agenda item, that we do have a positive factor out there, which is our interest earnings. And that seems to be it is going up. I mean, if you look at the financial report, we're probably getting close to, you don't have that yet. You'll get it next month. Double our interest earnings. I don't know that we're going to be able to sustain that interest rate for long term, but it's going to be higher than it has been for the last, since 2008. I mean, it's been the interest rate that on our interest earnings has been suppressed since the Great Recession. So we're going to have a better number there than we've had in the past. We baked that into this budget a little bit. We can bake it into a little bit more. So I have we have some comfort level, even with that 0.3 that we're adding this year, that we'll be able to handle that.
And would you say it's a fair assessment that if the governor and the legislature cannot come to an agreement on sustained funding, that there may be one-times again?
Yeah. So this is probably inside baseball, right? But, the governor has a extremely powerful veto pen. The legislature knows that, which is probably part of the reason why we got zero the last biennial budget, is because if the legislature gave the governor anything to deal with, he could kind of manipulate that with a veto pen. So the question is going to be can the two parties trust each other enough to come to some type of an agreement that they can live with, and see how that all plays out. So I think the worst potential that is out there, and we've come close to that a couple times in my time in the state of Wisconsin, is if we don't have a budget by the end of October when we're setting our levy and we don't know what's going to happen. And that could happen through, we have kind of both sides positionally bargaining right now. If the governor vetoes what the legislature sends out there, and we don't have a budget by October, then we just continue on with the last budget, which means no new money for schools. Now, everybody knows that. So the question is, can they work together to come up with something that's better than nothing?
And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll open it up, is, the other thing that seems to be a priority, and we'll know as we have our budget days at the Capitol here in a couple of weeks, is if there is agreement on special ed reimbursement funding. And we know from our budget that automatically $5 million goes from general fund over to special ed funding. If that is lessened a little bit, that brings money into our operating budget.
Absolutely. That would be huge.
Okay. All right. I'll open it up for questions for Gina, Andy, Dr. Bergstrom. Who'd like to start? Go ahead, Trey.
So table one, easy. I totally get that, fully support table one. My question is under table two. So 5.3 new recommended positions. We've talked about how the 4.0 FTE is really reallocated from unfilled K4 positions. I guess I get a little bit stuck on the additional one. It's the emergent bilingual teacher that was previously funded through ESSER. So isn't that really a new position?
It actually is, part of it would be new and part of it is reallocated from ESSER. Because what happened was the board approved a blended learning paraprofessional as part of the ESSER process, and that position wasn't filled. Instead, it was repurposed into an emergent bilingual paraprofessional. But the needs have become so great that we no longer feel that we can not have an additional teacher. Consequently, some of it is from ESSER and some of it would be new. Did I say that correctly?
Okay, and then the 0.3 band, that's really a new 0.3 FTE, correct?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Heather.
I just have a quick question on the band 0.3 FTE. Is that increasing somebody going from 0.5 to 0.8, or is that do we have a hard time finding a 0.3 person? Where is that coming from?
Well, we currently have a very wonderful part-time person. Now, how we go about filling that 0.3 is something that we'll discuss with HR, but it could very well just become a part of the contract of somebody we already have.
Mary, anything?
I don't think so.
All right. Tim, go ahead.
So when we talk about the budget dollars associated with these additions, our history has been we get experienced people to fill this. What budget dollars are we using? Experienced people budget dollars or new budget dollars or a blend of those?
So for my purposes, it's a blend of those because I look at staffing as across the board. And so we have people retiring, right? And then we hire new people. So we have, when I look at, for me, my projection, I use the middle level, knowing that we'll hire some at the blue level and some at the green level. And knowing, like I said, that it evens out because, and we have a few people that are retiring or resigning this year that are off the schedule. So that also generates savings. So I don't look at it as like position to position because we routinely hire 40 to 60 people a year. And that isn't always because they've left us, but maybe they move into a different position. And then for example, they're a classroom teacher and they become an instructional coach, for example. So when you're looking at 40 to 60 new positions each year, it tends to even out of who's retiring and who's hiring. And it depends on the time of the year also. So right now, I would say more experienced teachers are mobile because contracts aren't due until June 15th. But then once people sign their contracts, which are due by June 15th by state law, then we see that, people tend to stay in the districts where they've signed their contracts, which is wonderful. So then I know as we get later on in the summer, then it just tends to be that we're hiring people with less experience, not as a general rule, but just as a trend. So I really look at where do we start now in March and then where do we end in August.
So from a budgetary perspective, though, we're using the middle level.
That's what I use to determine when I have the number from the business office. I use the middle level. And then we also know that about 75% of our hires take benefits. So then we also project that benefit cost as well. But, and that's, proven to be a pretty accurate assumption each year. But obviously that can vary depending on who we hire.
Are we anticipating a change, a shift in that mobility of experienced teachers and the availability of new teachers, or are we expecting what we've traditionally had?
I am very hopeful that I'm planning for what we have typically had because with the passage of the referendum that we are going to be able to retain the fantastic staff that we have and that we won't have more mobility. If the referendum hadn't passed, I would be very, very concerned about that.
And that's exactly why I asked that question, because most of the districts around us also did a referendum. And so I would anticipate that we're going to have less mobility hiring people, that there will be a posture of less mobility for that exact same reason. We're looking to retain those people, and we went through a referendum to secure that. I would imagine other districts are in the same boat. And so I would imagine we're going to be relying more on newer teachers than experienced teachers for that reason. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. We are also, though, grateful that we are still a destination district. So when I'm looking at the applicants that we're currently getting, we are getting applicants that have experience from other districts. So that tells me that we are remaining a destination district and people want to be here.
Great. Thank you. That's it.
Anna or Leslie? Go ahead, Anna.
So I just have a question regarding the change from math to English. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't be doing that if that's what the numbers are showing us, but when we talked about the math teacher, we were talking about the extra support in algebra. So I'm just wanting to touch base on how that's going to be handled, because I know that was one of the reasons we were looking at adding that staff. So I'd like a little more explanation.
Absolutely, and that's the question that I posed to Mr. Pleiner when he called me about it. So if he would like to come up here and discuss it, that would be great.
Anna, you're thinking like a superintendent.
So a lot of these, we're at the stretch point across the board, and I was really clear, I think, with Dr. Bergstrom that we really could use one in the core across the board in the next 2 years. And so in building those matrices and kind of playing with section sizes, we feel like the area of least pain really falls in math. But again, this is where I would wince, right? You know, we're at a stretch point, and we're able to have, I think with our matrix, the way it's shaping up right now, and our math department will be right now working with us with those numbers. We can do one section of algebra support each semester, you know, and keep our algebra numbers decent by just running some of our higher level courses just a little bigger. But I think we can make that work. English, we've got, you know, 2,035 semester course requests, 4 credits required in English, currently 10 FTE in that department. And, you know, when we run those numbers, that's typically our department where we have the most failure historically as well. And so there's more students that require either credit recovery as well. And I just felt we lost a little sleep, the folks that were really diving in deeper to those numbers, that we felt like that's a need that I don't know that it's wise for us to defer.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay.
Anything else, Anna?
No, I guess the only other thing I would comment, I guess I support the idea of making sure that the experience that students have at Forest Edge in 5th and 6th grade is equivalent to what our students at RCI are getting. So I think that's a good decision, and hopefully one that is not very painful from a budgetary perspective. So I think that's a good add. The only other question I might have for Andy is, you know, oftentimes we find ourselves in a situation where we have some additional funding just from growth within the district, right? More kids, more, that brings in maybe some more funding. Do we have any projections for what we're seeing as far as enrollment growth within the district in the next year or two, based on some of the new construction going on? And I know we're seeing different trends in family sizes and birth rates, but I'm just curious if that's any potential other source.
We aren't seeing any indicators right now that would say that we're growing. All the indicators are pretty stable right now.
Okay.
Now, maybe I'll be delightfully surprised as we continue to go through this. I'm always the eternal optimist, but right now there's nothing I would want to bank on.
Okay, great. That's it for me. Thanks.
Leslie?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the emergent bilingual teacher at OHS. And we're looking at repurposing part of that from a paraprofessional. So do we feel like having this extra teacher means we wouldn't use a paraprofessional in this situation?
That's correct. We would take the budget dollars and then use that to help fund a teacher. So we would not fill the paraprofessional. It would be a teaching position instead.
So, but when we're actually talking about physically being in the classroom, is that going to be enough? Is that going to take care of the need?
Yes.
Okay. And then, but I had something else. Oh, I just want to appreciate supporting band at FES to have that equity with RCI. So.
Go ahead, Heather.
Sorry, I forgot my other question earlier and remembered it around the circle. So I'll ask a very similar question. I must be on a theme tonight, similar to how we were talking about visioning, talking about a facilities overall plan versus the needs. This is obviously, people have put a lot of work into, here is what we need and here is what we can maximize, and numbers and matrices and all of that. But it would be helpful to me to understand kind of what didn't make the cut, and then going forward, better understanding. Obviously, the math is an example, but I know we've talked about an HR position. There must be other things that are you know, if we had the money that we would do it. And so I would love some light shed on that part of it.
So you'd like us to talk a little more about what's on our watch list, so to speak, okay? When we make these decisions at this time of year, which probably seems early, but as Gina said, we do it because of the competitive market that we're in. When we're asking for these things, it really is based on the data that we have at the time. For example, when we look at the ESSER positions and the amount of FTE we're adding to math intervention, that was based on all of our mid-year math data and predicting forward what we thought people would need in the upcoming year. So, for example, RCI looked at fourth grade math data, not just their current data. So we do that sort of thing for academic positions. As far as building out what we have at the district office, we think that particularly related to HR, it'd be good to have that become a potential byproduct of the stay interviews when we talk about attraction and retention. So we really want to get through that process and see how what we have learned from our staff, how that might influence the way we think about allocation going forward. So it is possible we could be coming back to you at a different date based on the results of that, because a lot of what they spoke about was what they needed to stay in the district. And as we know, it's not just money.
Just to piggyback on that, a couple of conversations that Dr. Bergstrom and I have had too is as we look into the future on board planning sessions, as we've done for facilities and we did for the referendum, that we really need to look into the future about how we staff teaching and learning in the district, right? And so that may not just be staff, that could be, I mean, you've heard companies in Europe, it's now coming to the US in terms of 4-day work weeks. There are some school districts across the country that are 4-day school days. And I'm not saying that we're going to a 4-day school day. Please do not panic about that. But I'm saying as we look into the future in terms of teaching and teaching shortages or staffing or how parents are going to go to work, that impacts the school district, mental health, those sorts of things that as a board, we need to look into the future about how this country is going to operate as parents and as people, and how does that impact a school district? So it's not just a staffing plan we see in front of us, it's how we function as an institution and a body. So, those are things that we're going to be looking at as a board as we vision into the future. What could those possibilities be? And we'll engage the community in those conversations too. So I'm not jumping the gun and we're not talking about that for next year. But those are things that we look 3 to 5 years in the future. What does the school district look like?
Yep.
Right?
I think that's great. I'll have the Oregon Observer give you a call for a quote on the future of the school district.
I should have done a quote.
Right. That is helpful. All of that is helpful. And I guess, so, and it doesn't need to be tonight, but I think my request going forward is to have almost as Zane kind of had here's what didn't make it, just so that we can understand what isn't making it, right? So I think the math piece is not helpful that it's not happening, but helpful to understand that. And so it would be helpful, I think, across the board to understand what else is didn't make the cut going forward.
Proposals for additional allocation come in frequently, and we are not able to. So we can absolutely tell you what we are not able to fill in the future.
Okay, they are looking for a motion if we'd like to so approve the staffing recommendation. Again, this is not saying that things could not come back to the board in the future. So what we are approving is the recommendations from the administration as it sits tonight. All right, Heather with the motion, is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you guys for all your work on this. All right, moving to action item 4, which is the cancellation of the March 27th board meeting. Again, it's the second meeting of the month, so it's not mandated by statute that we have that meeting, but it is spring break. So I don't think all of us want to come in or ask our administration or our principals to come in during spring break for a meeting, so that requires a majority vote of the board. So I will entertain a motion that we cancel the March 27th Board of Education meeting.
I just have a quick question. Can I ask it before the motion? Or do I need to make a motion?
Let's put the motion on the floor first.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
All right, is there a second? All right, motion and a second. Heather, any discussion?
My question is, How many more meetings with Tim LeBrun do we have? If we cancel that, do we have one more only?
Just one more.
I just
I
want-
know.
I
Maybe
just-
we need to have one more.
I'm just saying, I just wanted that out there before we all approve that. One more meeting. All right.
Do we have like, do you have like a ticker at home or
Right.
something? He will miss us.
He's made plans for the next 52 Mondays.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak? Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. All right, moving on to last action item, which is action item 5, the College Now program, which is a recommendation that's coming from policy. So I'll start with Heather.
Yep, super quick intro. This came, I think, with 3-0, right, Gina? A recommendation from the policy committee, and that's where my part ends.
Gina, would you like to explain the program?
Certainly.
And the policy?
Yes, and thank you for approving the staffing plan, because if you see my computer pinging, it's all the requests for postings that I'm getting from the administrative team. So thank you. So in terms of the 342 Start College Now program, we have discussed this several times in policy. This is a program that is a program provided under state law. So there's a number of items in the policy that we don't have discretion over. We are asking the board, well, the policy approved it, so the board has a motion to approve it tonight. We have another policy, which is policy 341, which is the early college credit program. And that is a program where students can take classes at 4-year institutions for college credit. And so you will see in the near future, if the board approves this policy, that we would like to revise that policy so that they can both fit together. That policy or that program was previously started under state law, so it's an older program. Under that previous state law, that excluded technical colleges. So hence the genesis of the Start College Now program was to allow students to take courses at technical colleges that they could earn credit. And these are very popular courses with our students. I would say that some of the most popular are the EMT and the CNA courses, which is fantastic because if you follow the news, there are shortages in those areas. So this policy would help parents and families to understand that the program is out there, and then you'll see the administrative procedures with that. So we are shifting to a new website program, for lack of a better word, that's going to have our policies and then our procedures under them so that parents and families can better navigate our policies. So that's why I have them here, because I thought that families would be interested in them, but we're not asking for the board to approve them. So in terms of the Start College Now program, there's really several decision points that we talked about for the policy committee to recommend. One decision point that we have is that in order to participate in the program, the law requires that students be in good academic standing. We did define that in the policy as having at least a 2.0 and be on track for graduation. And we wanted to have symmetry with participation in athletics. So that is where the definition comes from good academic standing. And then we also talked about that we would put notice to families, which is a decision point for us. We have to provide notice by October 1st. So we want to make sure that that's on the website, but then also is in the academic and career planning guide so that we know that students start to plan out their high school experience starting at least freshman year, so they can see that when they're a junior or a senior that this program is an opportunity for them to participate in.
Okay, so it came from policy, so it does not need a second. So the floor is open for questions, concerns, discussion. Anyone? Go ahead, Anna.
So I'm just wondering, under the policy, obviously and this might be defined by the state statute, but that districts pay for the tuition for a student to attend. So I guess what's the funding source for that tuition? How is that paid for? And I guess what are the limitations, or what's the availability of being able to afford that for X number of students or X number of classes? Like, what are we talking big picture on potential opportunity?
So excellent question. The high school does have a line item in the budget for essentially pursuing post-secondary credit. And thus far, they have been under budget in that area. I would say, over the past, I think we went back about 8 years to look at that data. So we feel really comfortable that we do have a funding source. We are going to continue to watch that because anecdotally, I think in the past, you had to physically travel to the campuses. And so that might have been a barrier for students, not only in transportation, but in terms of your schedule. And so now, just with virtual learning and more post-secondary institutions are offering that, that I think it'll be easier for students to fit that in their schedule. Although I think a lot of the courses, when I looked at them, prided themselves on hands-on learning, because if you think about being a CNA or an EMT, there's going to be in-person things that you need to do, you know, similarly with science labs and things like that. So I know that that is maybe one of a barrier for students to not participate as much, just as well as having a full academic schedule at the high school. So we do feel really comfortable that we have sufficient funding for this. And there are parameters under state law that if we offer a comparable high school course, then we don't pay for the tuition. It would be if that's something that we didn't offer. And Mr. Granberg is in charge of administering that. So he does monitor that very, very closely. But we feel this fits in really well with the Portrait of a Graduate and our continuous commitment to personalized learning and helping students be college or career ready.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing. I think it's awesome. I'm curious, you mentioned that this may then suggest some changes to the Policy 341 early college program. Is this replacing that? Or you're saying that these two would actually work together with a different, maybe specific approach for what they're allowing? Can you
Sure.
Speak to that a little bit?
So the early college credit program is the 4-year institution. This policy in front of you is for technical colleges. And so you'll see in this policy, what we're recommending is that students they take one path at a time. So one semester I could take a technical college course, and then the next semester I could take a 4-year college course, but that we not have students on the same track at the same time. Because we also want to ensure that students are having the course load that's appropriate for them and that they're not getting overloaded. And then also you see in terms of your budget question, that we are recommending, and this is something the School Board Association recommends, is that the board cap the expense as 18 credits per student. And that could be a mix and match of either policy, but the total amount would be 18 credits.
I see. Okay. That's helpful. I really support this policy. I think it's great to offer additional opportunities for kids that can't get sort of the content they might want within the high school, or even just to be exposed to that higher level learning. So I think it's great. Thank you for your work on this.
Go ahead, Tim.
Just to ground the payment mechanism, because the policy requires that the course is successfully completed. That's to say that we don't pay the tuition, we reimburse the tuition for a completed course. Is that correct?
So I would have to talk to Mr. Granberg. I think it would depend on the student's financial situation, but the essence of the policy is that if the student didn't pass the course, so they failed and didn't obtain the credit, that we would be able to seek reimbursement.
So we would pay for it before it was successfully completed, even because the policy says the district shall only pay for courses that are successfully completed, which sounds more like a reimbursement as opposed to a prepayment.
I believe that he does both. So if we have a student that would need financial assistance, for example, be on free and reduced lunch, then we would pay the tuition. And then other students, if they enroll and they pay the tuition, then we would reimburse.
So does the policy have to be consistent with that? Or do we have a policy and sometimes go against that policy? How does the policy need to reflect that?
So if you look at the cost portion, which is in the procedures, what we're really telling families is that if the student doesn't pass the course, then the district would not be paying for that course, whether it means we don't pay at all or that we seek reimbursement from the student if we've already paid it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Katie, could you call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Ms. Bijak? Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thanks, policy. Thank you, Gina. Okay, and thank you, Mr. Granberg, for running such a great program. Okay, moving on to D, discussion items. 1, committee reports. Back to Heather for policy.
We'll be meeting in April.
All right, vision steering, Troy.
Same for us. We'll be meeting in April.
Okay, thank you, short and sweet. All right, moving on to E, information items. It's all you, Dr. Bergstrom.
All right. So visioning and strategic planning, when we did our data analysis as part of the staffing report. I'm really excited about student progress and will be very pleased to have the principals report that out to you at the end of the year, how our students have been able to be so successful and what that means for each of the building's goals related to academic achievement as well as social emotional learning. So excited for that. That's a big part of the visioning and strategic planning. And if I move to the teaching and learning update, gonna go back to that for a second. That's very related too, because they did make a decision on the math curriculum, and they've chosen a CPM for grades 6 through 8. So now our students from grades 6 through 12 will be utilizing the same curricular tool as part of their math learning experience. And we think there's a lot of value to that. And we're very excited, and we think we're going to see results that are positive in multiple ways. And so that, along with the fact that our students took the ACT March 7th, so we have that under our belts now too. I think that we are moving along in the school year. I can't believe it's March and all of these things have already happened. Yes.
I know this was the first year that was administered electronically online. Do scores come back quicker? I mean, I'm curious just how that works.
It's a nice idea, but I don't know if they'll necessarily be faster. But when the students did the practice one and were able to see their score immediately, I think there was a real level of satisfaction with that. And so I think a decision point is, should we be doing that another time, and allowing them additional practice. Now for the superintendent's report, and this is a fun one. But me, I would say, aren't they all? Because I really, really enjoy them. So first, we want to take a look at our really outstanding social emotional learning coaches, Ms. Kretschmann and Ms. Pleiner. Last week, it was National Social Emotional Learning Day. That was actually Friday. And so we're very appreciative of the work they've done to lead universal instruction in social emotional learning. I remember the very first time when they were first stepped into these positions, and our goal was to raise awareness on what social emotional learning is. And considering that in a very short amount of time, we've gone from raising awareness to students gaining pretty incredible competencies. As, in my opinion, measured by an interaction I had with a wonderful group of students at Rome Corners who wanted to have a lunch club where kids could go to quiet places for emotional self-regulation purposes. And the way they were talking about it and the language they were using was remarkable to me as far as their understanding of the brain and the body and the connection between the two. In addition, we want to say some very nice words about Ryan Stace. Congratulations to him. He was recently presented with an Award of Excellence for Exemplary Achievement in Technology Education from the Wisconsin Technology Education Association. So thank you very much to Mr. Stace, and you see Mr. Pleiner there, who he and Mr. Granberg drove up to Wisconsin Dells to attend the dinner with Mr. Stace and his family where he received the award. And if you remember, maybe some of you do, Mr. Stace is an Oregon grad himself also. Here we go. Now it's AmeriCorps week, and not all of you may be familiar with the fact that we have 2 part-time AmeriCorps workers in our school district, Rebecca Herring and Michelle Narragon. They've done really good work to showcase healthy activities. I think it might be our 6th year of having a Farm to School AmeriCorps members who work in our school district. And just to showcase a few of the activities that they take part in, they host taste tests for students with local produce. They provide nutrition education classes. They have taught virtual cooking classes during the pandemic and in person otherwise, coordinated farmers to speak in classrooms, and applied for grants to enhance the school gardens. So really, this program and the 2 wonderful people who are in it this year have done a lot to expose our students to healthy food. They work very closely not only with Mr. Tanner on the learning and student achievement component of it, but with Sarah Tomaszewicz in our school food service program too. So thank you to them. We really appreciate their work. Oh, takes a second for it to load here. But you can see this is such a Brooklyn thing to do. They had the Silly Staff Olympics, and it focused on promoting the importance of following the Brooklyn B's. Be a learner, be safe, be respectful, be yourself. So you can see from the pictures there that we had some young people who were really enjoying watching their teachers engage in the Silly Staff Olympics. I think that if that had been happening when I was in elementary school, I could probably still talk to you about what my teachers did. I think that kind of stuff makes a lasting impression. As does a new one. This is great. This was a super exciting visit from a local artist, Desiree Mayo, with our middle school students, talking about the book she wrote on Black excellence, as well as her journey as an artist. And then with solo and ensemble, there we've got some pretty amazing things happening with our students too. So congratulations to all the students in grades 6 through 12 from the school district who participated in the Wisconsin School Music Association Solo and Ensemble Festival. Oregon was a host site this year. So we had a very busy school that day, high school on the weekends. We thank our music educators and all the volunteers. And a really nice story was shared with me about this, that one of our high school students had been mentoring one of the younger players and came that day to watch him perform and ensure he had supporters in the audience, even brought friends with him to cheer him on. So it's just a reminder of all the good that's out there, right? Our kids are pretty wonderful people. A reminder to tune into the OSD podcast. This week it was on the formal wear drive that took place this weekend that was hosted by the Student Council. Oh, and this is kind of a funny one. I don't know how many of you saw this, but this...
Other duties as assigned.
Yes, that's about it. This is Mr. Pliner in action, making sure kids get to school. So that's pretty great. But we missed some good ones on math competition that I want to go back to. Thank you. I must have pressed the button a couple of times. Start with the spelling bee. So we want to congratulate our Oregon School District spelling bee participants. I wonder how many of you remember competing in a spelling bee when you were about that age. Yes. Oh. All right. Thank you very much. So we have students who competed in the regional spelling bee, Dan Schutz, Rory Dexter, Soren Scheifelbahn, and Ileana Foreman. And the middle school student, Rory Dexter, moved on to the state spelling bee, which was held this Saturday. So that is what would you call it, tried and true part of a young people's potential elementary or middle school experience to be a part of the spelling bee. And also want to thank our students and congratulate the advanced learning students who participated in the Math 24 competition. Want to congratulate all of them. They participated in the Greater Dane County Advanced Learner Network Math 24 competition at UW-Madison. So congratulations to all of them for taking a risk and going out and doing something new and pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a mathematician. And that's it.
If people didn't hear, Troy actually won his spelling bee. What was the word, Troy?
Oh, I don't know the word.
Oh, see? Well, that's unusual. I was going to make you spell it. All right, thank you for that report. Okay, moving on to F, closing. Future agenda, because we just voted we will not have the meeting on March 27th. Our next meeting will be April 10th, and that will be Mr. LeBrun's last meeting, so we will have some recognition and some special treats for you. All right, moving on to checkout. Anyone have anything for checkout? Go ahead, Heather.
I will not be here on April 10th. I'll be out of town, so I will have to miss that. So I'm super sad to miss honoring Tim. Yeah, I'll do something like that. But on a serious note, I just wanted to follow up on the SEL piece. It is incredible. I think I've said this before, but worth repeating. And each time it's a different noticing of my kids who are both in elementary school. The one in first grade was organizing his stuffed animals, and he put them all into crisscross applesauce, and they were meditating. So I think back to my stuffed animals were, all over the place, and his are meditating. I think for him to even know what that word is and to have a context of what that is really incredible. Awesome. And then a shout out to Mr. Orlowski, fourth grade at FES, because my other son comes home with an optional typed up meditation and for nighttime that they must do in class, but he likes to have us do it at nighttime, and we even had to find the right chime sound on our phone because Mr. Orlowski must have this chime that they use. So I just think it's awesome, not only the intentional academic side of the SEL and the learning, but just how our teachers are really living the values through that, and you can see that ongoing with the kids. So just a shout out to follow up on that.
Thanks. Troy, anything? Mary?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how glad I was to see the band, the .3 FTE band. We have an amazing district when it comes to music, and I'm very glad to see the additional support and the equitable distribution of that support across our schools.
Thank you. Leslie? Anna? Tim? Okay, nothing for me either. Okay, the board will take a 5-minute recess, and then we will go into closed session, and we will not return to open session. So thank you.